Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. I see that Charlottesville, Virginia is here and Atlanta is here. So is Western Australia. Thanks for coming in from all that way. Detroit, Michigan. What a pretty town Detroit is. I actually spend not an insignificant amount of time in Detroit, where you have a fabulous music venue in case people are in the area and not aware of it. Madrid, Spain is here. Milton, Washington. St. Louis. Um, Boston, Massachusetts is here. Florida is here. Spokane, Washington. Always proud when I pronounce that right. And also Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Sheboygan's pretty easy. And here is somebody from Delaware. Claire, I suspect you're here to see your senator. And now we have Marblehead, Massachusetts on Facebook. So Facebook is here. Thank you, everybody, for being here with a conversation with Senator Christopher Coons of Delaware. Thank you so much for being here, Senator.
Thank you, Heather. It's great to be on with you. I really admire your work, the clarity and the forcefulness and the evidence-based analysis that you give in a historical context that helps us get through the day.
Well, thank you very much. Although to some degree, I'm in the cheap seats and you are not, because you're up there on Capitol Hill. Let me give people a quick explanation of who you are, and then I want to talk about Capitol Hill. Senator Coons is a senator from Delaware. He has been since 2010, and he sits on a number of plum committees. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to him is he is the senior Democrat on the Appropriations Committee. I've talked about how important that committee is. The Judiciary, another big one. Foreign relations, by the way, I don't know when you sleep. Small business, which is huge in the United States. People sometimes don't realize how much that matters to our economy. Also, and this is what jumped out to me, Senator Coons sits on the Senate Select Committee on Ethics. And he holds a master's degree in ethics from the Yale Divinity School. And that combination of a real concern about small businesses in America, about appropriations and the way we spend our money, about how we interface with other countries, and about the ethics of all that seems to me to put you right in the center of what appears to be a storm on Capitol Hill right now, Senator Coons. How are things going up there?
Well, thankfully, I'm in Delaware today, so my blood pressure has come down a little bit. It has been in Washington. You may know that in the last Congress, I was the chair of the subcommittee that wrote the budget for USAID. I have long been involved in and care deeply about our humanitarian work overseas, our partnership with other countries, our development work, and to see it just shredded, torn up, shut down in a way that has caused hundreds of thousands of unnecessary deaths really started the year off with a bang. Right after President Trump pardoned all the January 6th rioters, including the ones who had viciously assaulted police, I knew it was going to be a tough year. The chaos and the unpredictability has just gotten greater and greater as month after month has gone on. This week, we've seen both the unexpected military action that removed Maduro, the dictator of Venezuela, and brought him to the United States to stand trial, and the tragic shooting of a 37-year-old mother of three in Minneapolis yesterday that I think has really struck the hearts of many of us. So it's a challenging time. We are making real progress on our annual appropriations bills. That's a process that has to be bipartisan for us to get anything done. And honestly, we've made real progress in pushing back on some of the very worst of Trump's policy initiatives and budget cuts. I'm actually cautiously optimistic that we will see the rejection of his just insane projected cuts to the CDC and the NIH, the ways in which his budget would have slashed funding for public housing, for support of public health, for so many other things. So I wanted to close with some small note of hope and optimism, because it's not all awful all the time. Yesterday, just to give a hopeful note also, Senator Merkley, a dear friend from Oregon, went to the floor just to speak passionately about how the plaque that was supposed to be made honoring the law enforcement officers who defended the Capitol on January 6th. It's been in hiding. Speaker Johnson refused to put it up anywhere. And Jeff, he thought he'd give a brave speech, but he would be blocked. It passed. The Senate unanimously agreed to put that plaque up in and near the Senate. We also had an unexpected outcome in a vote on constraining Trump's power to use our military in Venezuela. 5 Republicans joined with the Democratic senators to pass it. So it is not a completely hopeless, lawless, chaotic mess, but it often is.
So I have 2 questions for you on that. And the first one is a simple one, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but when you say you are in negotiations and you are making progress against the most extreme of Donald Trump's cuts, for example, of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, literally, what does that look like? You're sitting there with a folder in front of you, a big folder in front of you, and you say to your Republican colleague, next to you, ain't happening? I mean, literally, what do you do to push back against the extreme things that you don't like in an Appropriations Committee meeting?
So the specific meeting that I was actually in yesterday was about funding Ukraine and helping support Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression. And that's almost exactly it. I had a folder, Republican Senator McConnell had a folder, and our two counterparts and our staff were there, just 8 of us in a room. And we had a vigorous exchange about the importance of sustaining our support for Ukraine. Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin is the one who deserves the credit for successfully fighting hard to reject deep budget cuts to medical research by the CDC and NIH. She's the one who's the lead Democrat on the Health and Human Services bill. She's also pushing to reject deep cuts to AmeriCorps, a national service program I value greatly, deep cuts to the Department of Education. And at the end of the day, Heather, this happens because the filibuster still exists in the Senate. They have to get Democratic votes to pass the annual appropriations bill. Without the filibuster, we'd be lost, because then they frankly would just ram through whatever they wanted to in terms of spending and policy through the appropriations bills. So at the moment, we're holding the line because we still have just a little bit of power, because without Democrats, you can't pass a spending bill and the government shuts down again.
Which is what happened with what they call the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. They didn't need Democratic votes. And of course, now everybody is scrambling over that. But now the second piece of what you said jumped out at me, because one of the things that seemed to happen yesterday afternoon was cracking in the dam of Republican resistance to anything that the Democrats wanted, in part because the American people are so furious over the actions of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and over the shooting of Renee Nicole Good. And first of all, is that accurate that things seemed to loosen yesterday? And second of all, if in fact we are, as I think, entering a new period of American politics, what does that look like for the Democrats? Because they can't simply say we're opposed to the man who has lost his mental acuity in the White House. They need to have a program going forward that takes into account the fact we're in a very, very new political era.
That's right. And look, I was struck by the fact that Trump had Andrew Jackson as his sort of historical hero in his first term, and he's moved to William McKinley. Because Jackson was a populist. And so Trump in his first term tried to posture as, yes, I might be a billionaire who sits on a gold toilet on Fifth Avenue atop a 50-story tower, but I actually see you and care about you, average working American. This time he shifted to William McKinley because he wanted a president who championed tariffs. So in his first couple of months, he did a lot of blustering and talking about McKinley. And I thought, and many thought, it was because it was McKinley who was famous for using tariffs. The part I missed was he also admires McKinley because he was an imperialist. It was McKinley who seized and made a part of the United States, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, Hawaii. And that seems to be a new theme for Donald Trump. He claimed just a few days ago that we will be running Venezuela for years, that he's not afraid of putting boots on the ground, that he's going to keep launching military attacks on Venezuela. And as I mentioned, Democrats were surprised pleasantly that 5 Republicans joined us in passing a resolution, moving to debate on that resolution that would constrain Trump's ability to unilaterally use the military against Venezuela. Let me move to the more important point you just made, Heather. Democrats have to say what we're for, not just what we're against. In the closing days of the 2016 presidential campaign, Secretary of State and former Senator Hillary Clinton really focused her campaign on Trump is bad. He is a bad person. He has bad character. He has bad ideas. But not enough Americans, when they went into the polling booth, as we analyzed after the 2016 election, felt they knew what she would do, what her priorities and her plans were. I was a co-chair of the Harris campaign in 2024, and we heard the same thing from voters there, that they didn't hear her talking about the things that mattered to them: healthcare, childcare, the cost of housing, the cost of groceries. And they had a sense of what Trump was going to do. Trump ran on lowering people's costs, making America healthy again, releasing the Epstein files, and no new stupid foreign wars. And bluntly, he's failing on all 4 of those. He is losing popularity because they had to be drag kicking and screaming to release the Epstein files. This action against Venezuela and threatened action against Colombia and Greenland are making MAGA Republicans more and more alarmed. And prices and costs have not come down across the board. They have for gas, but they haven't for housing. They haven't for daycare. They haven't for groceries. And RFK Jr. is doing wild things with public health. So that's an environment where there is a moment, an opening, where some of this wall of Republican support in Congress for Trump is cracking. You've got Republicans, 17 of them yesterday, voting to extend the Affordable Care Act tax subsidies. Now we have to say, what are we for? And so I recently published an article in, surprisingly enough, Democracy Magazine that says we should have a simple set of 3 lenses that we look through: opportunity, security, and justice. And I'm trying to make, I think, a simple point. The average American is hopeful, wants to believe that they and their children can do better, that social mobility, that a chance to get ahead exists in this country for everyone, not just for the very wealthy and well-connected. And if we focus on opportunity and what it takes to make opportunity real for people, we get their attention, we get their support. Thankfully, we get their votes. But if we aren't clear about how we're fighting for opportunity for them, I think we have a hard time being heard on justice. The second, which is right next to it, is security. Folks are very anxious, for good reason, about physical security and about economic security, about being able to afford retirement, about being able to have quality and decent health care, about being protected from violence in their communities and their neighborhoods, about not having to fear that their child will be shot in a school. If we can deliver a coherent, clear agenda on opportunity and security, I think we then get the chance to talk about what makes us Democrats, which is justice. There's a core difference, I think, between Republicans and Democrats over a long period. Republicans focus on liberty. We focus on justice. Liberty means smaller government, fewer regulations, lower taxes, at least as Republicans historically talked about it. Justice means addressing racial injustice, gender injustice, ways in which our system has not worked for millions and millions of people, hasn't included them, hasn't seen them. And if we want to continue to fight for a more just and inclusive society, I think we have to make it clear that we care about opportunity and security and justice. So it was an attempt at a simple frame. Heather, what I'm doing now is beginning the hard work of deciding, okay, what are the 5 concrete bills or agenda items or policy ideas that really appeal to, speak to the millions of Americans who've given up on the Democratic Party, who don't think we care about and fight for working people anymore?
So I'm going to push back on this in the sense that I know, especially former Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign extremely well, and I know former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's pretty well. And in fact, they had policies as long as their arms that were literally bills that they had prepared to go forward to do things to make it cheaper to buy a home, to make it cheaper to start a small business, to improve education, to do all of the things that you're talking about. But they did not get the media coverage that Trump saying lock her up did.
I
And
agree.
and it seems to me as I watch the Democratic Party that there are many policies that are already out there, and there are increasingly numbers of independent media that are helping that message get out. But until the Democrats deal with the fact that there is a right-wing media ecosystem, it didn't matter that Kamala Harris had fabulous small business policies. They were great. And now people are looking around and going, wait a minute, shouldn't we have a policy that does X? And she literally had that written down. And the same with Hillary Clinton, but nobody knew. So I wonder about the relationship between the actual messaging, as in Trump says lock her up and he gets coverage. The Democrats don't have that kind of soundbite approach to the country, and maybe could if they talked about things like no kings,
Right.
or free childcare, or that they care not so much about justice as they care about opportunity or access to resources. Is that a fair criticism, do you think?
It is a fair criticism, and I agree with you. There were binders full of policy proposals, as there almost always are on presidential campaigns. I was pointing more towards the lack of economy and focus. Look, Trump got attention's leading chance of lock her up because it was considered outrageous at the time. I'm simply trying to point to the fact that we can't count on outrage to carry us through. We have to persuade as well. And to persuade, we have to have a few concrete, simple proposals. To your point, free childcare for all is the kind of thing that would speak to people and say, we care about opportunity for you and your family. We don't get the attention span for the average voter to describe 50 policy proposals. We don't get the attention span to talk about 20. We're going to have to choose a few that speak to what our core values and priorities are. And so I wasn't suggesting that genius Chris Coons, I'm going to come up with my own ideas. There are lots of good ideas out there. In fact, some of them we've already really tried. The child tax credit that was refundable made more of an impact on child poverty than anything government's ever done. Yeah. And yet we got no credit for it. And yes, that is largely a communication challenge. Joe Biden, of whom I was very proud as president, I succeeded him in the Senate. He's a Delawarean, signed into law a whole menu of robust bipartisan proposals that made a big difference in everything from combating climate change to investing in infrastructure, to combating drug addiction, to reducing violent crime. But in some ways, the menu was too big. And as he moved towards re-election, and then as his vice president succeeded him as our nominee and moved towards election, we didn't have 1, 2, 3 things that we were saying, okay, and this is what we're going to do. I actually spoke with Vice President Harris directly about small business and the importance, the passion that Americans have for entrepreneurship, for being their own boss, for taking their own chance. And in the recovery after the pandemic, the Biden-Harris administration did more directly to help small businesses get back on their feet than any government in our history. Right. And she did do, I'm not saying she didn't, she did do visits and tours and conversations with small business owners who are broadly representative of the folks who we want to fight for in our country. It just didn't stick. And so honestly, Heather, part of what I am doing is trying to process, why didn't we get more credit for the really good things that we did and deliver on? And why did we get so much blame for a few things that did not go well? So I'm trying to suggest a frame and a foundational argument. And I'm fully open to folks who say, no, that's not it. Let's try that. because between now and 6 months from now, we have to have messages that connect with the folks who are going to focus on this election come September.
Okay, so I am gonna engage with this because I find it fascinating. I would love to talk about media at some point, which I really think is an issue here. But in terms of getting the American voter behind a political program, I think you just put your finger on something key, and that's that the person who really pioneered what President Joe Biden later did, of course, is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And when he took over the office, of course, the United States was in a depression, and people at that point loathed Herbert Hoover, which is an interesting comparison to where we are with Donald Trump now. So FDR had a leg up. But crucially, what he did is he tied in his policies. This is FDR, his policies of things like regulating banking so you could no longer have the fraudulent behavior that was going on, and regulating the stock market, and making sure there was a basic social safety net, and protecting workers, and all kinds of things that were fairly complicated laws. But he talked about them as being part of a larger thread of American history, that this was about being a courageous American who believed in democracy. And later on, he talked about it as opposed to fascism. He doesn't do that in 33. But I wonder to what degree the American political system sort of went off the rails after 1960, when we got the argument of political scientists that basically the parties were the same. We all believed in democracy. We all believed in growth. We all believed in justice. And so instead of talking about those American principles, what we really needed to do was to talk about the nitty-gritty of policies, so people would say, yeah, I trust your policies more than those policies. And one of the things that Trump did was, even though I find his rhetoric appalling and abhorrent as an American, he did tie his rhetoric to America. When they stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021, they said this is 1776. So what about the idea of taking the policies that you're talking about, like free childcare, and talking about those American foundational democratic principles of having equal access to resources and taking care of our children? Do you think that would make a difference? Because people have heard of FDR. They've heard of Abraham Lincoln.
They certainly have. And I will say one of the reasons Joe Biden announced his reelection campaign in Philadelphia, and he made speeches at key places and points to reference sort of those landmark moments in American history, was to anchor his fight for the soul of our nation to a fight for democracy. The point I'm making is that Trump had more success in saying, and I'm characterizing his attack, because Joe Biden has an open borders policy and isn't deporting dangerous criminals, he doesn't care about your security. And he succeeded in changing, in the popular mindset, the number one threat, the number one reason that our kids might be unsafe was a lone gunman attacking people at a church or a concert or an elementary school. That was something that after Sandy Hook, and given just the daily drumbeat of mass shootings, if you asked your average American, what is the unsolved public safety problem of the day that Congress should do something about? It was guns and safety in public spaces for years. Donald Trump managed to get the American people to say, no, it's immigrants, and it's dangerous immigrants. And no amount of talking about how many dangerous, violent, criminal aliens were being removed addressed that. And at the end of the day, we lost the argument. Part of my article deals with how Democrats have to say, we do support secure borders. We do support deporting violent criminals. We don't support inhumane and unjust actions in order to deliver security. The shooting by an ICE agent, the ways in which Trump's first term is remembered best for his policy of separating parents and children by putting kids in cages and separating them, using cruelty against children as a tool of immigration policy. That's unjust. So to get back to my framework, sorry, I keep coming back to it.
No, it's good.
We've got competing ways there of delivering security. You can deliver security by cracking down on dissent, by saying we have to have masked ICE officers, by saying you can't question or challenge what you see on the video, which is that she was driving away, not driving toward. You just have to trust us and let us crack down. You can deliver security that way, but you can't deliver justice. Democrats support police. We don't want to defund the police. We want qualified, capable, law-abiding police that have community support. We want to deliver security through justice. And that's a difference that's foundational for how Democrats want to address this. We also, frankly, view immigrants as contributing to our country, being a vital part of our history and our culture, being a beacon for those seeking refuge from oppression and violence overseas defines one of the most important threads that runs all through American history. But periods of xenophobia and disrespecting and wanting to deport immigrants is also a thread that runs all the way through American history. And so I think we have to find a way to position ourselves as a party that says we welcome and value immigrants who come here legally. We welcome and value refugees who are vetted and come here and contribute. And we want to celebrate the fact that this is a country of refugees and of immigrants, and that's made us richer and more robust and more successful and more diverse. We can't win the race for AI. We can't be a successful, productive country without high quality people, without people of a wide variety of backgrounds from all over the world coming and contributing their skills and their talents to the future of our nation.
Do you know, I know you need to go, and I really hope we can continue this conversation, but I just want to observe that when you were talking about what the Democrats should do to reclaim the support of the American voter, what I just heard you say about immigrants is rock solid gold information about who we are as Americans. And I have to say, I'm not entirely sure I've heard anybody in an elected Democrat's position say that as directly. And it really hits me that that's the kind of language that while you're saying, well, we got to do this and we got to do this, you just did it. And that's probably worth thinking about.
And Heather, you know, the Catholic bishops and the first American Pope in history have focused relentlessly on this point, that yes, our nation can and should be secure, but we have to do it in a way that respects the divine spark in every human. That America is great because America is good. And to be good, we have to embrace and see the humanity in everyone around us. And to miss the inhumanity of a violent shooting, the killing of a young mother of 3, to miss the inhumanity in the terror that's being imposed on immigrants as they come out of a mass on Sunday, to have ICE agents swoop and begin taking people away. To have ICE agents going into daycares and schools, into hospitals. Like, there's a right way and a wrong way to go about delivering security. And I do think there is a basis in values, and for me in faith, that speaks to how we do this justly and how we do it well.
Well, thank you, Senator. Thank you for the work you're doing. We did not get to talk about the fact you have proposed a new immigration law, and maybe we can do that on another occasion. And I'd love to talk to you more about this and about, as I say, the media. I think that that's something that we often give a pass to the way that information is conveyed and blame the people conveying it. And that's to me, from where I sit, a huge problem with our political system.
It is. Thank you so much for the chance to be on, Heather. I look forward to talking about these things, social media, artificial intelligence, and how we restore our sense of community, hope, and optimism as we look at the year ahead.
Thank you so much, Senator. And thank you all for being here.